All right, everyone. Excited to have my guest here with me today is Coach Bill Zenisek. Bill, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bill is leading our sports performance effort at the Arsenal, and I wanted to get him on the podcast for the reason of he's got a really cool background. He's has great ideas, great things to share, and we thought it'd be fun to get together and rap about kind of his background, which I do want to share, and I want to learn more about it. So I saved a lot of my questions for today's podcast, but also for anybody who's listening that's a dad coach or a mom coach, or if you're an athlete, if you're a high school athlete or middle school athlete, listen to this. I'm sure you're going to get some nuggets here with the questions and things that Bill and I talk about that could be useful to you, your athletic career, decreasing injuries, increasing performance, but really doing intelligent things with your time and energy and sorting out the, hundreds upon millions of ways things you can get online to kind of figure out like, oh, what should I be doing? Everyone's full of opinions, but what should I be thinking about? Those kind of things are what we're hoping to break down. So, with that, Bill, I'd love to hear, I think everyone listening would love to hear just a little bit about your background. So I don't know, you have high school athlete on your sheet here. So I'd love, maybe you start in high school and then we'll kind of work from there.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. Thanks for the opportunity at Arsenal. It's been fantastic. Third weekend now, so learning a lot and, starting a new programming. So it's fantastic. So really even before that, I was thinking on the way over here, when I started lifting first, knew what lifting was when I was in middle school. I was one of those guys who had those weights all full of sand. I was one of those guys that had those in my room.
Those plastic ones?
Yeah, plastic awesome. Full of sand, leaked most of the time because they're always cracked for some reason. So I was doing bicep curls and, glute bridges and stuff in my room before I even knew what an exercise was or what the muscles were, just because it felt good, So that's really where I started, lifting and, getting in the habit of being in shape. I was always that kid. I was always the fat kid, I was always the last one running around the hill when we had to run for football. So I think that's what's motivated me, just to make myself feel better. So now at near 40 years old, that's all I want to do is just feel better, but I was doing that when I was 10, 11 years old. Right. So from there, I went on to high school. I was an athlete in high school. I was an athlete, I feel like, in my entire life, playing various sports. But the person that really influenced me the most was my defensive line coach. So I was a big D lineman, much bigger than I am today, believe it or not. D tackle, a coach named Bill Hoagland at McGuanago High School. So I'm from Wisconsin originally.
All right.
He led up our...
Weirdly enough, I actually know where that is, and I actually did work at a plant up there called Aptar in McGuanago. They had a McGuanago campus. So I'm totally geographically tracking where I'm at right now.
That's wild. Most people don't know. Usually I say I'm from Milwaukee. It's close enough.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, this guy, he led up our strength program, which at that time, I think late 90s, early 2000s, really wasn't a thing that I really knew about in high school. So he led it up. I got kicked off as offensive lineman my junior year because I couldn't remember plays. I wasn't very good at that. So he took me underneath his wing. He's like, you're all-time defense from now on. All right, so we're just going to lift, we're going to play defense, and we're just going to, create havoc in the middle, which for me was great, being a big guy. So he took me outside of in the off season of football, we would lift in there. He introduced me to powerlifting, which was one of my, cores. That's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. That's where I got a lot of drive from in college, was competing in powerlifting. So he started all that. So we would lift heavy, and I saw the transfer of performance onto the field. So as I got stronger, I could move the opposing players, the centers, much easier. So that was one of my pride points is the day of my senior year when I could bench 315. Great. At 315, I can push around any center in our conference. So that's when I really started to get in my mind, hey, this is something that can work for me. It's going to work for other people. So that's where I start off in high school, as just that athlete that's just going to train hard. I was never naturally gifted. I was never going to get a scholarship. I went to Division III school just to try to play college. And, I got cut my freshman year of college. And so I'm like, well, I love powerlifting. Let's go powerlift. At UW La Crosse, where I went to college, they had a powerlifting team. So I started off that my freshman and sophomore years. Our coach was a graduate assistant. So he obviously graduated. So he's like, hey, team is yours, if you want it.
As a coach?
As a coach.
Oh, cool.
So starting my junior year of college at UWL, I took over the strength conditioning of the strength, I guess, of the powerlifting team. The funny thing is we added some kind of conditioning component. So if we know...
Probably not popular.
No, not very popular at all. So we did on Wednesdays because I took after the high school coach that I knew. Every Wednesday in high school, we do something called agilities, which I didn't know what that meant until I was in college and taking exercise science classes. But every Wednesday we do like agility ladder. We do different jumps, those speed technique things, so that's where I really derived that from. If you can be a big person, you can be a strong person, but you got to move. So I took that inspiration, initiated that on Wednesdays in our training. We would train hard Monday, Tuesday. Wednesdays would be agility and conditioning. Thursday, Friday was training hard again. So that was really empowering for me that I could actually take over a team. And then my senior year, I had to call out. We had, I think, 5 to 7 females and 2 males, including myself. Some other male on a powerlifting team. But I've never, first of all, this is my second year coaching. I've never coached a female in my life. So that was my first introduction to female athletes, which was, really strange, but exciting at the same time. Seeing how males and females are motivated, exercise a little bit differently, and different cues you have to use for males versus females. It was groundbreaking for me. So that's where I really opened up my coaching. So we went to collegiate nationals my senior year. I had I think she was 124-ish pound lifter. So is that 50 some kilos? She took first place in her weight division.
Oh, wow.
Which is phenomenal. She was a sophomore at the time.
It was the coaching.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to get to that. So that's where I realized, hey, my programs actually work. What I'm doing is making a difference. We can actually be successful with things that I'm doing in my coaching. So that's, again, another empowerment phase is like, all right, I'm going to do this. This is a career I really want to get into because I think I'm good at this. It came natural.
Right.
I went through my exercise science degree. It was challenging, but it felt natural. So that's really what I thrived at the most. So from that position, I made some connections. We had a good link between UW La Crosse, between that college, and the strength conditioning department at University of Minnesota. So I had a chance to go there, work with Cal Dietz, who right now is a giant name in strength conditioning. So when I was with him, this was in 2006.
All right.
Fall 2006. This was before, are you familiar with Cal Dietz and his training at all?
No.
So he has a book he wrote. It's called Triphasic Training. It's one of it's almost like the Bible of strength conditioning. People live or die by that book. It's a fantastic book. It's based off of basically training the 3 different phases of lifting. You train the eccentric phase, you train the isometric phase, you train concentric phase individually, and basically put them back together. And the theory is once you train all phases, make those phases strong, the whole lift is going to be much stronger, much more powerful.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's an incredible text. So I recommend it's a textbook. So if you're aware of that, it's not easy reading, but a lot of great research has gone into it. So going back to Minnesota, when I was there, he was in the beginning phases of creating that text. And he has a website. You asked me for some resources. Cal Dietz in triphasic training and his website, Excel Athletes, is a great resource. So if you're mom or dad at home looking for things for your kids, Excel Athlete has some stock programs on there. And there's obviously a paid subscription where you can go in and get more personalized programs. Cool. Yeah. So excelathlete.com is fantastic. He's my go-to source. There's some cutting edge stuff, so it might scare some people away. It's going to be a little different if you follow his, but it's all for the benefit of the athlete.
Right. Well, everything. I know we're kind of here at your story at the University of Minnesota with Cal, but I think everything was crazy until it was validated.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's straight to conditioning where it's like you'd see things like, oh, that's crazy. And now like you'll go look on any NFL field or at in a weight room for like the NBA or some basketball team. And all that stuff came from somebody going out there and saying, hey, I think I could do this different than this old textbook. Yeah. Hey, I think if we did this might actually get a different response. And then you see it show up. So I always love hearing those Genesis stories of like, and everyone was doing it different until this happened. And they thought we were crazy. Yeah. And then we showed up and won. So yeah, it's cool that you had that opportunity with Cal. Probably learned so much. Yeah. And that's where I really understood the science behind it. Because before it was just, if you lift, you get stronger, and that's the result. I didn't really think much more than just kind of copying lifts and trying to lift hard, like a lot of us do. But for that, it was like, hey, there's a science behind this. There's a reason why the muscle responds this way, or, here's a certain prescription on how to achieve this goal. So that's where I really like, hey, there's something else here. There's a knowledge component, not just being, this big beefy guy that knew how to lift and then having other people do it. So for me, that was another, point in my life that really turning point, on changing, forming who I am now. Yeah. And what a confidence builder, knowing you have somebody of that caliber that you're learning from. It's what a great place to like kind of steelman perspectives where you can go out there and say, hey, I know this because, and how a lot of, even young coaches, like they're hungry for that moment where they feel like I have legitimacy. Yeah. And when you, listen, anybody listen to this, everybody's riding on someone's coattails. Everyone's standing on the shoulders of some giant. If you're not, it means you're probably not reading a book. Somebody wrote that book. You're not looking at research. Somebody else did that. You didn't do that research.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
a lot of that's built. And I think some people, there's people that overvalue it. Like, hey, I need 50. I mean, you have 36 certifications. How many more? You know stuff.
Yeah.
Like, go get action. There's other people maybe on the softer end of that it's tons of practical.
Yeah.
They probably got a long way, but could get bolstered by it. So there you were with Cal getting at it. And was it 2006?
Yeah, fall of 2006.
All right, cool.
Yep. So I was with them, and then I was looking for an intern or something to do next. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. I was searching job boards when I was an intern. All of a sudden, this job posting comes up for a grad assistantship at Ball State. And again, I'm from Wisconsin, was in Minnesota for a little bit. Ball State comes like, what is Ball State? And the only thing I knew about Ball State was the hats that people were on that said Ball U.
Heck yeah.
I thought it was a joke. Like, there's no way this is a real place. So I did some research, emailed, sent my application in. This guy calls me back. He's like, hey, this is Aaron Wellman from Ball State University. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is different. So we start talking. He's a really intense guy. He's the director of football strength conditioning at Indiana University right now. So he's talking. He's a super intense guy, but means well. And, I owe him most of my career because he gave me a chance. He's the one that reached out. I applied 10, 20 different places as an intern, and no one ever called back. But Coach Wellman called me back. So we talked 2 or 3 times on the phone. He's like, he calls me one morning. I've never told this story. I'm going to release it here for the first time. It was a Saturday morning, early morning. I'll find more about early mornings once I got down here at Ball State. It was like 6 a.m. Eastern. So Minnesota, it's 5 a.m. Central. So I wake up, laying in bed after, having a few beverages at night, just half hungover. I'm like, hello? He's like, do you want to be the next grad assistant strength coach at Ball State University? I'm like, sure. I was half in the bag at the time. So that's really what started my journey down to Indiana. So that was
you picked up the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Good thing I could find the phone
right
after that night. So I went back home, for a week or two for Christmas, and then drove down here to Ball State. So that's really where I started off.
And welcome to Muncie. What year was that?
That was January of 2007 is when I moved down here.
Awesome. So there you're working under Aaron. What'd you learn?
I learned a little bit of everything. So Aaron, Coach Wellman, empowered me to actually take on groups. So at Ball State at the time, we were in the weight room where it is right now over at the football stadium, but it's just 2 of us. So it was the head coach, the director of strength, and then me as a little grad assistant that didn't know anything. So the first day I get there, he shows me around. He's like, all right, I'm going to put you through a lift that our players go through. I wasn't ready to lift today, but so he takes me through, as intense as it would be for a Division I football player. Keep in mind, I tried out as a Division III football player and didn't make it. So he's put me through a Division I training program, and I just.
It had to be exciting though to be like, all right, let's. You'd have to really put the game face on.
I did for about half an hour, then I just about collapsed. Like, I can't do this. So he's like, just so you know, this is what our players are going through. So the intensity that we expect of the players. The intensity I expect you to give them as a strength coach. So again, that was just an eye opener. Like, this is a different level. This is Division I. Even though, say it's just the MAC, it's still Division I,
I almost think like in those weight rooms, I mean, and again, this is just my perspective now as a Division I athlete. I was in track and I was in the weight room, but it's like, I think there's levels to the game. Mm-hmm. And when you have Division I football players and basketball players, it's a different animal. Yeah. I think a little bit because there's more stakes, there's more optics and everything. I just, I think when you get to mid-major or smaller schools, the difference between that conditioning, because you're not at LSU, you're not at USC, you're not at Notre Dame, you're not at some of these or a Big Ten school. You're here. So what can get done in that weight room? Like, I think there's a higher demand, because the genetic difference of a lot of those kids is just undeniable.
Exactly.
So when you get in there, it's like, how much work do you want to put in? Like, there's a real material difference versus a guy like Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald was Aaron Donald, even though with all the hard work, that's still, he gets to start from that.
Exactly.
I get to start from 5'10", 185. Like, it's just not a fair game.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of cases, a strength and conditioning coach and program, like, you have to be more on, you can't get away with much in mid-major. Whereas in a big time school, you would imagine a big power conference or even a pro, You know what I mean? Like, look at what's walking in the door. It's like, don't get him hurt. Almost is more of a priority than, well, if I can just make Myles Garrett a little stronger. That really?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I mean? Versus a kid who walks in who just came in from JUCO. All right, let's get you, like, see how you move. Let's get you mobile. So I don't know. Would you echo that, or would you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's just like, we're talking a little bit about going to the NFL. You're there to basically be barriers or safeguards. That athlete doesn't roll off the road is really what you're trying to do. You do have a huge opportunity to make a difference, in a lot of athletes' lives on this mid-major type level. Even in high schools, I mean, you're still going to get your genetic, freaks out there that come in that you can change a little bit. But I think for me as a strength coach in my career, I've been more rewarded by those players who have come in, who have a great work ethic, but may not have the strength or the speed. If we can improve them a little bit, that's going to make a huge difference.
Right. When it's great that, I think a lot of the best coaches come from that experience in their own athletic career.
Yeah.
Like you did and like I did, where it's like you got cut from a few teams. You were never like, you're the next thing. And it's like, hey, we have another spot on the bench. Can you like that? I think there's a lot of great coaching that comes from that, because you need to learn more ways to win. You need to learn more ways. Like, how do I maximize not enough?
Yeah.
How do I, like, what do you do? I might not be able to get faster, but like stronger is like, man, the economy is wide open for people and strong.
Yeah.
Everybody can get strong. Cardio. Everybody can increase their, like, you can find some advantages in there. And I think in some sports, like, people downplay like the advantage of, like, you watch like some football training sometimes, things. I'm like, do you know there's a fourth quarter?
Yeah.
Like, I'm watching training, so like there's a fourth quarter. Like if you're fresher than them, that is a major competitive advantage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And even in the pros, you see like, oh, they're getting tired again. I'm like, this was what you do.
Yeah. This is you train for
the whole time. Like, it's the same amount of time to play a dang football game. It's not, there's no surprises.
Yeah.
This guy's really big and strong in front of me. You knew that.
Yeah.
Like, you had all offseason to prepare for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we go into your entree into kind of the athletic freaks, your pro career, and you think about that field, like, what are the stories, if you had one or two, of maybe some of those maybe athlete transformations that you got to experience, or some of those moments you got to experience with somebody who made the team, was on the Ball State football team, and put the time in?
So at that time, I was training with those players pretty hard. If you don't mind me jumping ahead to Ball State baseball. So coming back to Ball State, but in a different role, so as a head strength coach with Ball State baseball, where I had more influence. I was running Coach Wellman's programs. That was my job and responsibility there. But implementing my programs with baseball and then seeing the transformation of those athletes. So we had a player, Justin Conant, came in. He was a undersized player, and that's what with baseball, that's what the head coach wanted to do. He prided himself on recruiting small, undeveloped, but high work ethic type of players. So his job, or my job, I guess, when he brought him in, was how do we basically polish those hidden gems, and get them to be prolific players in the field as best we can.
Moneyball.
Yeah, exactly. So players are overlooked, by your IUs, by your Purdue's, by your Notre Dames. Who are those players that we can get here at Ball State?
Right.
So he placed a huge role on strength and conditioning, which for me was fantastic, because that's what I like to do, is develop athletes. So Justin comes in, he's a smaller guy, I think maybe 5'10", 5'11", maybe $160 or so, I think, when he came in, if I remember correctly. But he came in, he was a hard worker guy. Like, he had a high work ethic, did everything I asked him to do 100% all the time. So Coach Maloney's like, Justin's a little slow right now. We need you to work with him. So we worked with him. I did some extra sessions with him, just volunteer on his own part. So we worked on speed technique. We worked on his agility. He was a shortstop second baseman. He's like, he can't get to the ball quick enough off the bat, right? So let's do some lateral agility stuff. So we started putting those into his program. We upped his weights. He was on a weight gain program for a little bit, and I'm trying to gain some more mass so we can gain some more strength. So Justin ended up being a starter the last year I was with him. Started at second base, for a Division I baseball team. So for being a guy that's coming in that is likely going to sit out or not see much playing time his first couple of years, to going to be a starter for that team, and that's really what drives me to continue on this profession. It's players and stories like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So back to Ball State football. Like, okay, you're there, and the next place you went, it looks like a pretty decent upgrade in terms of talent and what have you. So how'd you get from Ball State to the Indianapolis Colts?
So again, I lucked out in networking. there. Coach Wellman knew the assistant strength coach at the Indianapolis Colts. So he got me an interview. He got me in the door, which is huge. If you can establish that network, like we're always told, network, it does work, but you still got to be a good worker. So if I wouldn't have worked 2 years hard for Coach Wellman, coming to weight room at 2:30 in the morning to get stuff set up for a 5 a.m. group, I don't know if I would have been in that place. But I put a lot of time and effort into that, and he saw that, and kind of opened the door to the next level. So I went in, and this was all just, it felt like a dream, driving up to the Colts complex off of 56th Street, driving up through the gates, meeting all the players. So first of all, seeing how stinking big NFL players were was a big shock coming from our guys. So I walk in, they just asked me a couple questions. They knew my work ethic, just want to make sure I actually knew my stuff first, make sure I was a decent guy walking in the doors. So I think it was just an interview or two, and they asked me to come on. So I came on as an intern with the Colts. For that, they had, at that time, I think they have a couple more on staff now, but it was a head strength coach, in the NFL, what they call a second assistant.
Okay.
And then, first assistant, and then we had 2 interns, so me and one other person. So that was a great experience. A really interesting story, and it really shows the humility of Peyton Manning. He comes in the first time, and I'm awestruck when he walks in the weight room. Like, oh my God, it's Peyton Manning. So he walks in, he looks at me, he's like, "Hey, I'm Peyton Manning." Reaches his hand out, shakes my hand. Like, dude, I know you're Peyton Manning. I know everybody knows who you are. But for me, that was my first real introduction to what a good professional looks like. Someone who is humble enough to introduce yourself to every person in the building. The guy you see on TV of Peyton Manning, last night on a Manning cast, that's who he is. It's not a show. That's who he actually is in real life.
Wow.
So that's where I really learned more about what it means to be a true professional. Yeah, you're an elite talent. You get paid a lot of money for the most part to play a sport, but you also have that side of you that, is a good person. You're high character. You care about those around you. And, I thought that was the most important part.
What was your involvement like being an intern? I'm sure like folks listening to this, obviously coaches at the gym would be interested in like your involvement in like actually coaching and interacting with those athletes.
Oh, with the Colts, it was quite intensive. So that was a really neat thing is, we had a training. We came in late February of that year. So this was in February 2009 that I was with them. So we came in about a month or so before players had to report. So reporting was different than it is now, where players came in earlier. But they trained us. They trained us on how to do the movement screen. So with the Colts, we did the functional movement screen, which I had some familiarity with because we ran it at Ball State. And I think that's what helped, with the Colts too. They wanted someone that knew that system. So he trained us how to do that, how to run players through the FMS. They trained us on what their standards were, what the expectations were for players. So by the time the players came in the building, we were, an extension of them. So the head coach, director directed over everything. The first assistant was really hands-on and just like with us interns. So when the guys would come in, and it was different than Ball State. Ball State, we had 6 lift groups throughout the day. We had 15, 20 guys coming out per time. We just grind through the workout, lift heavy, and then move on to the next group. With the Colts, it was more surgical. So with these athletes, you had to make sure that you did the right things that were exactly right for them. So it's a philosophy I use now with our program is an individualized group approach. Right. So we have all these athletes on a similar program, but they all have different routes or different offshoots of that program. Right.
It's like that time. It's like you kind of look at that time and energy for output. Like there's a different tweaking of all of that based upon what you need, but like you're ever not going to need like lateral movement, or you're never not going to need to move load forward, backward, sideways, and take it's like probably not. You probably want it in there. Yeah. But what volume? Exactly. Based on there. So 100%.
And what intensity and what piece of equipment? If we had on the program, today is supposed to be a heavy barbell back squat. Well, Peyton walks in the door, we're probably not going to do that. We're probably doing something different. Where if a rookie comes in the door and his training age is less because he's been in the league a lot less time, we're probably going to go a little more and push him closer to the elite level. But with a veteran, we had a very veteran team that year. And that was the year that Colts went to the Super Bowl in 2010. We went to the Super Bowl. So we had, Peyton on the team. We had Dwight Freeney. We had, Bob Sanders.
Bob Sanders, Erie, PA. That's where I came from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was my wife's favorite player for a very long time. But we had all those big time players, the Dallas Clarks, those guys that were just elites at what they did, and it showed in the weight room. I mean, they were professionals, through and through. Come in, do their work, and it made my job easier.
So what was the most jaw-dropping lifts that you saw from people there that you're like,
It was probably Dwight Freeney that would come in. So they usually have a walkthrough in the mornings, walkthrough practice. They would once they get back to the locker room, they had an hour or so, whatever it was, a press time. They get some lunch, then come in, get their lift in, and then go off to practice in the afternoon. And that was their typical day. So Dwight would come in after a morning walkthrough, talk to the press for, a couple interviews, come in, put on a couple plates of squat, rep out, a few sets of this was not just a regular squat like you and I would do. These are 4 or 5 plates on the side, so 405, 495, 570 plus, just
pedestrian.
Cold. Yeah. Ugh. Just cold. Just rep them out. All right, coach, I'm done. All right. You're Dwight Freeney, you're Hall of Famer. That's what you need. That's what you're going to get. So that was, to me, it just showed how genetically gifted some of those athletes were.
Yeah.
For us, it would crush us, without any kind of warm up, sitting on a stool and talking to the press for half an hour. It was incredible.
I watched a guy muscle snatch like some Bulgarian dude just recently on Instagram or YouTube. I don't know what I was watching, but I watched this Bulgarian guy muscle snatch like 350.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I'm just like just like one of those things you're like, it's hard to believe what I just saw there. Yeah. And it was just like, he put it down, just smiles. Like, it's like nothing. I'm like, I am so weak. And I am so small. You get that?
Yeah.
All right. So how long were you at the Colts and what was like your transition to your next stop?
Sure. I was with the Colts just for one season. So it was just a year-long internship. Right. So that was through the Super Bowl, which was just an amazing experience, cool. To experience the whole postseason looks like, just even being like, we're fans, we can go to Lucas Oil and be part of it. But just hearing all that, down in that funnel of the bowl, it was absolutely amazing. Like all the stuff you watch on TV with the postseason, we're handing out shirts and T-shirts. I was there on the field, getting one of those.
I was fortunate enough to be at one of those, the offensive lineman's wedding.
Yeah.
That end of that year, they got married in the summertime, and a lot of those guys had shown up to the wedding, and they were watching this just on TV at this bar or whatever, and they just literally watching highlights of with their Super Bowl rings on, going, I can't believe that happened.
Right.
And I'm just sitting there looking at it, and I'm like, up, obviously, because they're just gigantic.
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Dylan Gandy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's my wife's friend, and he or her married. So I got to slight brush with fame there. That's all that is. All right. So you got done with your year at the Colts, and then what happened to you? Where'd you go?
Well, I didn't have much time. So after the season got done, after we got back from the Super Bowl and resettled, my wife's like, we got to go. I got to go to see my mom's. We need to get out of here for a little bit and just do a little vacation. So we went out to Maryland. That's where she's from. So we went out there for a couple days, and I get this phone call. Hey, this is Chip Morton from the Bengals. You have time to talk? Like, of course. Cincinnati Bengals are calling.
Wow.
So luckily, sometime during a combine or whatever it was, the guys from the Colts, they talked to the guys from the Bengals, since it's so close. And they're like, do you have any interns that you just passed through that it would be good for this position? So luckily my name came up, and so I must have done an okay job for the Colts. So he called me in. I went down to Cincinnati for the day, and I had one interview with the staff, and somehow must have knocked it out of the park there. I don't know how I did it, but so they called me back. Hey, do you want to join us? So that was the morning we were in Cincinnati. I had the interview. They call us that afternoon, and like, we're in Cincinnati, let's go ahead and start looking at apartments. So I'm gonna have to move down here. And my wife is still in Muncie. So we just, found a place, and, it started a week or two later.
And what was your job there?
So my official role or title was second assistant. So again, a hierarchy in NFL, you have your head guy, you got your first assistant, and then second assistant is right below that. So my role is just as an assistant strength coach, whatever, need to be done, got done. So we would take all the athletes through programs, and their program at the Bengals was closer to what I was used to in college.
Okay.
So that's just how their director ran it. So we ran groups. We had groups of 15, 20 guys that would come in at certain periods of time throughout the day. We'd have different stations, so I'd have a station. Chip Morton, the head strength coach at the time, had a station. The assistant strength coach would have a station, and the other assistant would have a station. So the players would come in, we'd coach them up on that station, they would rotate to the next one.
And what did you learn? I mean, now you're in NFL, you got your paid gig here. Mm-hmm. You're kind of legitimized to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. What did you learn working under Chip? Like, what is kind of the bigger takeaways you got?
The biggest takeaway, and this was Chip's, he taught me this, but one of his former head football coaches taught him this. We were trying to go through some program design and having some struggles, with what to do and how to organize the design for that upcoming offseason. So all of a sudden Chip's like, you know what? Let's just try it. If it doesn't work, let's try something different. So that philosophy has stuck with me for a long time because we're always trying to find perfection.
Right.
Like, and I think a lot of high school parents get that same thing, or even just us, just trying to train ourselves. Like, what's the best program? Best program likely is the program you're not doing. At least the way we think about it.
Right. Right.
So the best program is one that's going to work at that moment. It may not be what's going to work later on.
Right.
When I go back and look at some of the programs I created for powerlifting, going back to begin this journey, I'm like, why would I do that? That seems like the dumbest thing. It seems like I'd get someone injured doing that.
Right.
But it worked at the time. With the knowledge I had at that point in time, that was the best program. So that's one thing that Chip taught me. It's all just a grand experiment. Programs never will be perfect. As long as you have the athlete's best interest in mind, it's going to succeed.
Well, something we'll probably get into later. I'm excited to talk more about like assessment and the importance of assessment and knowing like what are we training to optimize.
Yeah.
Versus like there's foundational, which it's almost like a diet in a certain sense. There's certain things you just need, you can't get by. But then as you go up chain, like what are we optimizing for? And I think that's where it's like you can start catering to now there's buckets and like zip codes of programming that do make more sense versus other ones. Where I'd say like, I want to be a good triathlete. And I'm like, well, probably shouldn't be on our strongman program.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I really want to be great at this thing right here. And I'm like, probably shouldn't be doing CrossFit. Like, why? I'm like, it's a good level set, like thing to stay on that has me ready to like, then train and optimize something if I chose to, but it wouldn't be like, I'm going to run a marathon, train CrossFit. Yeah. I'm going to powerlift, train. Like, it just wouldn't be the protocol you would throw out there.
Yeah. You got to know your goals. You got to know what the outcome, what you want to do is.
How important was assessment, whether it be with the Colts or with the Bengals? Like, what did you see there that maybe you're like, wow, like this is something that maybe people don't realize when even now kids that are watching Instagram videos and whatnot saying, whoa, like, what do you see in those two scenarios that you had there that you bring to your coaching now that you're like, this is something I really take with me that I think the athletes I work with are going to benefit from?
Yeah. With the Colts at the time, underneath John Tureen, he was a head strength coach I worked for there. His whole system, his whole strength program was built off of the FMS. So he was, from what I understand.
For those who are listening, what is FMS?
FMS is the functional movement screen.
Functional movement.
So it was created by a guy named Gray Cook. And I learned later on, I think that John Tureen and Gray Cook are pretty close.
All right.
So they would bounce ideas off each other. So when I first got to the Colts, I was used to more of the collegiate mentality, like, oh, we got to get stronger, with the Colts, like, all right, there's more to it, because these guys are already strong, and these are the best at football, in the world. Especially with the Colts at that time, they were the best team in the world, So these are the best of the best. So with them, I learned that it's more movement. Strength can get you so far, but when you're a veteran player, when you're older, once that's getting 40 and plus, you gotta look at movement first. You can still build strength, but without that foundation of positive movements, strength is going to crumble. So that's one phrase that, has stuck with me that John Tureen taught me, is that you cannot build strength on top of dysfunction. You can, but you probably shouldn't.
Most of my injuries come from that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just range of motion. You can lift all you want. So if you're bench pressing all the time, you're going to get stronger. But if you don't have range of motion in your shoulder, you don't have range of motion in your thoracic spine or your lumbar spine or your hips or any other joints or stability even, that structure is going to come tumbling down at some point. And tumbling down, you think of like, building a house on a cracked foundation. It's kind of that same concept.
Gosh, you walk through most of the Globo gyms, like the many that will remain unnamed. Like you just see these just disaster stories. Yeah. Just when you watch people, when you know a little bit, you can just watch people move and you're like, like you're babying that elbow. Exactly. And so you're doing this instead of that. And you're doing this instead of that. And you don't want to, be arrogant enough to be like, tap someone on the shoulder and be like, hey, you know what I mean? It's like not the time, but I can totally see that. Yeah. So in those situations, you got to see assess, reassess, and have that kind of really inform the paths that you took. Yeah,
definitely. And that's how we start off every year. And whenever players would report, in, I think March, in that time in the NFL, they would report. The first thing we would do is take every player through an FMS, through that functional movement screen, so see where they're at. So imagine the best of the best athletes out there, you're taking them through, a 6-step movement screen just to see what their score is. And a lot of those players didn't do very well. There were some that did great, but some that, hey, we got to take a step back. We're not going to load up your squat today. We're not going to load up any other movement pattern. Today, we're going to focus on bodyweight squat. And if you can't bodyweight squat, you have no business putting a load on top of it.
Can I ask a question right now that I know that just comes up a lot? Range of motion on squats. Yeah. Is there any, when would it make sense? Like, maybe there'd be a time to make sense for like 3/4 to parallel. But like, is there any rationale for not being able to carry load, down to full range of motion, hip crease below the knee? Or like I tell my son, hey, well, how do I know I went low enough? I'm like, your hamstrings touched your calves. So like, what's your take on that based on your experience, both like with college and with the pros? Like, what did you find there during that journey?
You're going to make this go viral, aren't you? We're going to get
Hope so.
a lot of trouble in the strength conditioning community. So my philosophy on that is do what you can do, like what your body can do. So some of us just aren't built to go down in full depth. Some of us can't get, quadricep below, hips below the knees. Some of us aren't built that way. So that's one thing I was always hardlined on, coming from a powerlifting background. Like, I got to get that white light. I got to sit down as low as possible. So that was ingrained in me. But then when I started to go these higher levels, you go to the Ball State football, Division I football, go to Colts and Bengals. Some of those players can't. And that's just the mechanism that they have.
Is it a function of can't now or can't ever?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Then there are some athletes that, their joint angles, the way their body's constructed, where it's just not possible. So my thing has always been, let's go to your end range of motion. So we always want to measure like, hey, this is what you're supposed to be. It's great in theory. It's great when I'm teaching over at Ball State to teach the theory, but in practice, some people just physically cannot.
And how much crossover is there from that, whether it's by design, like that's just the way their body's built, or it's by the way that they trained? What connection have you found between that and injury, if there is any?
I mean, I think there's a correlation, and some of it you have to unpack. So like you mentioned, is it either they can't or they won't? So that's really where
I just think, like in high school kids, it's easier to lift a lot more weight if I don't go as far, whether it's bench press or bench press a little less because you can bounce it off your chest, but more so with like back squat or deadlift. I could spread my legs all the way wide and deadlift 500 pounds. I'm like, it went 6 inches off the ground, dude.
Yeah. Well, now I feel it's like a personal attack with powerlifting. But yeah, so I think that's really where assessment comes into play.
Okay.
So assessment, we take all load off, and now we're just trying to do a body weight squat.
Right.
So if you can do a body weight squat, getting down to depth, there's no reason why you can't do it with a barbell on your back.
That makes sense.
Or barbell, on your front if you're doing a front squat.
Okay.
So I think that's why assessment's so powerful, is we take out all that external load. And if you can't do an assessment, we're going to dive deeper. And what's the reason why you can't do it? Is it because that's how your body's built? Have you had a previous injury that you're trying to hide from me in the assessment process or in the questionnaire? So there's a lot of things that we have to try to unpack. And I think assessment creates that conversation. Because I'll see it. We did this a TPI demonstration for our coaches.
What's TPI?
TPI is the Titleist Performance Institute. So it's just another form of movement assessment.
Thanks.
Yep. So we did that demonstration for our coaches. I lost my train of thought there.
Talk about range of motion, body weight squat.
Yeah.
If you can carry your body weight down.
Yeah.
Trying to jog you.
Yeah. They were right there. Yeah. So just going through range of motion. So a lot of us can lift heavy weights, but we've never stripped down the load. So to give you an example, when I was in high school and in college, when I was still powerlifting, my max bench press was 425. Granted, I was with a shirt on. I was in competition, so we're going super wide. It's probably a 4 inch bench press, but still, it was a lot of load. I could not do more than 5 or 10 push-ups. So my body could handle the load, but it wasn't very functional.
Gotcha.
And I know we throw around that term a lot in fitness, a lot about functional fitness.
Yeah, because you sell things when you say it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's trendy. It sells memberships. But really that's what we're trying to look for. So when I look at functional, can your body operate at its optimal performance, essentially?
Right. Well, and I think when you get these assessments, the biggest problem I have, and I think this is a problem in our gym, and I think like we need to solve for it, is that most people are prisoner of the moment. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to win today. I want to do this today. There's a performance I need today. And rarely is today the day is that you're training for. Yeah. Like, there's an outcome down sports performance more than anything. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, how do you take these assessments, whether it's like the TPI, the FMS, and keep it forward facing, mm-hmm. like daily, to make sure that you're calibrating, because that's not the goal, mm-hmm. but like making the athlete see through these filters. Yeah. To kind of right size the day, like having some sort of dashboard available to them or app where they can see all in one place. Mm-hmm. It can come together, and then all in one place for the coaches. Who do I got coming in today? Where are they at? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where it's like just in time, right now, always getting reminded, but in a pain-free way.
Yeah.
Because it would be like, all right, we're gonna do the FM. We did that yesterday, coach.
Yeah.
Like having it like that's too much. But remembering the last time we did it 3 months ago, hey, we're reassessing here at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Like knowing what we're aiming at and how this is gonna be on there. Like I don't know. It's one of those like levers that I thought like, man, we figured that out. You get an athlete that's much more calibrated for the training session that day versus managing the ego of some athletes, which they all have them.
Yeah.
Right. Like I want to win. I want to get better. I want to be faster today. And one kid's going faster at something else. Or everyone's looking left and right.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of harness, hey, like we need you over here. We're to the point where you almost change the rep schemes and you change the distances to just avoid the comparison, like all the kind of Fugazi things we do.
Yeah. And that's so to comment on that too, with movement screens and just with corrective exercise in general. That's one thing I'm trying to do is change a culture around that. So we did that pretty well when I was over at Ball State, is that we're going to make movement screening and corrective exercise, or at least the movement screens in general. When we do that, quarterly, every 3 months or so, we're going to make that as sexy as looking forward to max day, as sexy as looking forward to your 40-yard sprint day.
Right.
So that should all be within that same conversation that, hey, we're going to max out on squats day, we're going to max out on bench day, we're going to do our 40-yard dash, and we're also going to do our movement assessment. So that should all be within that same discussion. We're always going to look forward to the next day that we can reassess ourselves, and then, we'll create some new corrections from there.
Yeah, I love it. All right, back. I want to land the plane on your story, and then we're going to dive more into the weeds on sports performance. So you were at Cincinnati Bengals. Talk about how that like wrapped up before you found your way back here to Muncie and Ball State.
Well, Cincinnati, we were not good. So for that, I learned how to continue to motivate. So I did a lot of coaching work that year on how do we take a losing team and continue to stay motivated. With the Colts, we were, I can't remember the exact record. I think we lost one regular season game.
Spoiled.
Yeah, I was really spoiled. I think we went 15-1 or whatever the regular season was, and went through the playoffs, lost the Super Bowl that year. And then I get to the Bengals. Bengals had a really losing culture, not the Bengals of today. Bengals of 2009, 2010, we went, I think 4-12 that year. It was miserable. But the strength conditioning, I absolutely loved. So that's why I got up. So we figure, how do we keep the athletes engaged through the strength program? That they can still come there, we can still see improvements, work on next year. How do we keep them going?
Well, some of those athletes, you're performing for a contract on another team.
Yeah,
exactly. At the end of every one of those years, a lot of times they're reconstituting contracts and trying to dish. Like no one's position. I mean, that's probably the most vulnerable place you could be in the NFL.
Yeah.
You're on an 0 and blank team. You're on a 3 and blank team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's proof right there, barring like some major industries catastrophically at different poor Jets.
Yeah. Right.
Like last night with Aaron Rodgers falling out. Like you're not far away from that. It's like every day you're putting out a resume for when you put your name in the hat to join a mini camp somewhere to try to get on a team.
Yeah. And that's what helped in a way. I mean, on the field was different. Some of the morale was down, obviously, as you start to lose a lot of games and you're not going to compete towards the postseason. But in the weight room, it's just like that. I mean, the intensity was still there, just like it was with the Colts, when we were doing well. So that's the one thing I learned, about how pro athletes are wired a little bit differently, just for that very reason. Like they're year to year, there's a chance you could go somewhere else. So you got to be ready. You still got to be at your top of your game. Even if your team's not, competitive that year, you still got to be.
Right.
So that's one thing that I learned quite a bit. Like, hey, we got to keep going. We can't feel sorry for ourselves. You got to keep going. It's like we get kicked when we're older, working out, something happens. You got to keep going. You got to keep going to that next level.
It's never fun recognizing reality sometimes, but you got to keep moving.
Exactly.
So did they can the whole weight team, or like how did you transition out?
So that year, that was 2010, February 2010 when the season ended. So that was the year the lockout happened. All right. So I went back home. My contract was a 2-year contract for that position. So I came back up to Muncie because my wife was still here. I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I was waiting for the NFL to get back in session. I'm like, I got to make some money. I can't just rely on her paycheck.
Right.
I mean, it was nice for a little bit, but at one point, like, I got to fend for myself a little bit.
Right.
So I went and personal trained. I tried that out for a little bit. I went down to Lifetime Fitness in Indy and personal trained there for a couple months. I'm like, this isn't for me. I'm a strength coach. That's who I am at heart. I don't like training. No offense, but 50, 70-year-olds. It wasn't my passion. So then all of a sudden, there's a position opened up at Ball State in exercise science and in the program I'm teaching now with physical fitness and wellness. So teaching exercise to all our undergraduates. So they called and obviously talked to my wife Kendra first. Like, you think you want to do this? She's like, yeah, he hates personal training, so try it out. So it called me in. I went to the office, talked to my soon-to-be boss. We talked for like 15, 20 minutes. He's like, do you want to work here? Show me the contract. It had 5 digits on it. Like, yeah, fantastic.
Right.
So
immediate upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going from not having a job to, making actually real person money or adult money, I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. So that was in fall 2011.
And look at us sitting here in 2023.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is my 13th year here at Ball State. I taught for a number of years in exercise science and physical fitness and wellness and coaching at Ball State. I still had that passion. I still had that drive. I want to work with athletes at some capacity. So I knew the head strength coach at Ball State, Jason Roberson. So I knew him when I was a grad assistant. We talked a little bit when I was with football. So he catches me outside. We cross in the parking lot. He's like, yeah, I heard you still want to coach a little bit. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. He's like, what do you think about coaching baseball? Like, baseball? Like, I know nothing about baseball. I'm a football strength coach. That's all I know. He's like, well, Coach Maloney wants, he needs someone that's going to be there full time, that's really passionate, really knowledgeable, that's a little bit older, instead of having a grad assistant. I'm like, I'll sit down and talk to him. And I knew Coach Maloney. We'd talk back and forth in the hallways, just passing, because we worked in the same building. So I sit down with him. We hit it off almost immediately. So, again, one of those right time, right places type of thing. So he's like, well, welcome on. If you want it, you're welcome to be here. So I started off my journey in baseball, which I never in my career ever thought I'd be with baseball. So my mentality with baseball was first, hey, let's watch the game. Let's learn. And my wife is a huge baseball fan. So luckily I could, bounce a lot of ideas off her because she worked as an athletic trainer in the minors for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
So I got a lot of ideas from her and just from watching the game. And my philosophy as a strength coach, as a new baseball strength coach, hey, let's learn as much as we can. So let's go with the big minds. So another resource, looking at Eric Cressy, the top of the game.
I heard a podcast with him. He's terrific.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. So that's the name in baseball strength conditioning. So I knew that. Like, I'm listening as much to Eric Cressy as I can, read all his stuff, just absorb his knowledge. So that's where I started. And just the philosophy of, every athlete, no matter what sport they're in, has to be training as an athlete. Have to be training as an athlete. So, I knew how to make athletes strong from the very beginning of my journey with my first place powerlifter, all the way through. Like, I know how to make athletes strong. So I'm not going to be intimidated by the sport. I'm just going to make sure those players that show up are athletes, and the sport should take care of itself.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then through Ball State baseball, we got to meet each other.
Yeah.
We crossed some paths as we were kind of figuring that out. And I'm glad to have you. So that's a great transition point to talking shop, because now, for those listening and that you're within the, currently right now, the regional area around Delaware County here in Muncie, Indiana, we have the good fortune of having you at the Arsenal. So like, for those of you listening, it's like, man, it'd be cool to have my athlete, my young daughter, my son, or even some college kids, regardless of what it is. I want to do sports performance. I want that kind of training intelligence put into what I'm doing. And now that opportunity is available. Yeah, so definitely. We could talk a little shop here as well. So I guess, and you and I have talked about this before. It's like, all right, you need sports performance. No one knows what the hell that is. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, people know what speed is, a speed camp, an agility camp, a power camp. Like, that's something where, all right, I want to be faster. Yeah, I want this. So I guess, what are the ways that you would approach defining sports performance for someone listening? And I suppose, like, why even is it necessary?
Yeah. I mean, for me, sports performance is just where I started with Ball State baseball. Is we're going to prepare athletes or people to be athletes. That's all it is. We're going to give them all the tools necessary. We're going to make them stronger. First, let me backtrack. We're going to make sure that they can move well first. So every athlete that comes in, we're going to do a movement assessment with first. That way I can pick out any previous injuries. We can pick out any deficiencies before I start to really build that house of strength on top of their bodies. So if they can't move well, we're going to start that foundation first, doing bodyweight exercises. From there, now we're going to start to build some strength, so muscle, some strength, eventually get some power that they can transfer to any sport they want. So we're not going to train any specific sports. It'd be nice to have a specialized facility, but what we're doing right now is preparing.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. Exactly. We'll get there. But right now we're just training students to be athletes. That's all it is. We're giving them all the tools necessary to do whatever their coach asks them to do.
What do you think people like? Where do you feel like when you're looking at athletes? You've been at this for a long time. Like, where's the weakest area when you're kind of looking at athletes, kind of in general, that man, this is a deficiency, even within relatively strong, like, weightlifting culture, be it at a high school or something like that. Before high school, it's kind of helter skelter, whether I'm training or not. Like, what shows up most often when you're like, okay, here we are again?
Yeah. I think it's really body awareness. I know we were trying to talk about this earlier, but just being aware of how their body looks in space. That's the benefit we have at the Arsenal is there are no mirrors. There's no mirrors anywhere. So I think we have to teach them just general body awareness. And a lot of that comes from movements. So we focus on, a pretty comprehensive warm up, just to work on, hey, what does this look like? What does this feel like when you do a squat? What does it feel like when you do a hinge? How do you breathe properly? And that's how we start off all our warm ups with just 5 deep breaths. One to set your intention for that day, but just to be present. So if we can't breathe, if we go out there and coach asks us to run sprints or if we're going to go on the field and try to play, a 60-minute game, if we can't breathe and we can't recover, we're not going to do very well.
Gosh, yeah, breath work is one of those things that just seems so like in the past, like new agey woo woo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing yoga, coach. I want to do this, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you can't even control that, I can control it, but it's autonomous too. It's like, it's going to do it. It's going to operate itself. It's just amazing. And then building from that in my own experience, looking at like respiratory rate, like my heart rate, like my HRV, like going even further to be like, how do all these things influence that thing?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't even start there, realize, hey, there's other stuff going on in your brain. Yeah. You only use X part of your brain. Well, great. Which part's working your liver right now?
Yeah.
Bill?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What part is keeping you standing upright
right
versus not? And everyone's like, oh yeah, it's probably doing something there. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, by the way, I have no experience whatsoever in that, but it's just like assumptive. But like that body awareness is, gosh, it's so hard. I mean, honestly, in my leadership coaching, that's the hardest thing I run into is like, hey, so-and-so needs coaching. And I talk to them and it's like, yeah, they just think everyone here is an idiot.
Yeah.
So what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? It's like there's a lack of awareness that I'm part of the problem, or there's a lack of awareness of a limb in someone's body or a deficiency, be it cardiovascular, be it like a muscle deficiency somewhere, like T-spot, like all that other stuff. Yeah. If you don't even know where we're working, you can't even move your mind to get there to start producing something. I mean, it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, and then that's when people start building up, like I probably did over time, putting a lot of load on just a real kind of cracked foundation. Yeah. And at some point, it's just a matter of time. Exactly. And people will leave any given day. See, I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, one more strand in a million strands just got cut. 3 more strands. Yeah. And every one day, like, what happened today? This started like 11 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason why you walk differently, like why you shift side to side. There's something that happened at some point. Not saying you specifically, but just
you're probably right. No, I probably own that. Yeah. So it sounds like that it's, you talked about like making like assessment, like FMS and TPI, like sexy. And it sounds like that's a move from like, we really have to triple down on quality.
Yes. Yeah.
Before we work on like quantity or of even like reps, numbers, et cetera, or load.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the core tenets in my program too. It's, it's going to be quality first, especially a lot of athletes we work with are younger. They're just starting off. They're coming in there on their own. They're paying their own money to be with us at the Arsenal. Or opposed to in the high school, you have a captive audience. When I was with Ball State football or Ball State baseball or any of those other teams, you had a captive audience. Those were athletes in the team. They had to go through the program. Where here, it's my first voyage into the private setting. Well, now I really have to sell that. I have to make sure that they have value. People see value when they come to see me. So if we're not making you move better, if we're not getting you stronger, if we're not increasing certain metrics that we have, we're not doing our job. And I know, I apologize for saying this because you're our owner here, but it's not going to make money, if we're not, treating people like they need to be treated, giving people what they want.
Right.
So I'd rather do that, than just take a whole bunch of people in, get them stronger, and then move them on to the next level.
Right.
This should be a foundation for the rest of their career that, when they go from us from middle school, go to high school, do well in the high school level, if they have an opportunity to go to the college level, that's a pride point for me. We have that up there, like, hey, this athlete's, from Muncie, Indiana, or from Yorktown, Indiana, or wherever they're from. Hey, they're at University of Michigan now. And we're going to take pride in that, because we help them achieve that. We were one small part in their journey.
Yeah, right. And I think it's also that what you speak to is like having a system, like recording things. Exactly. And then not only just recording it like on a piece of paper, here's my sheet, but having that a more dynamic way of capturing that. Yeah. Where the modern athlete or the modern student, like what's in their hand?
Yeah.
when they walk in the door.
Exactly.
They're on their phone. Like, how do we get that intelligence? Like, how do we get that in here from that phone?
Yeah.
So it shows up there that they're primed up with like not only body awareness, but like that training IQ relative to where they need to, like your lookout points. I got to watch out. They're in the red, and like your yellow points where it's like, hey, these are areas I need to build, but I'm not like red being likely to cause injury in the future versus yellow being like, hey, these are performance threatening versus optimize.
Yeah.
Hey, your cardio is awesome. Let's keep it that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or a heavy deadlifter. Great. Like for a sport, you might not need even much more than that to accomplish what you want.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's like, I agree with you 100% that one-to-one with a coach is great as long as you're with that same coach a long time and there's just that intuitive relationship between one person.
Yeah.
However, to scale something and maintain that individual, like group individual focus requires that level of capture and then retention and then reassess where it's like not painful for you or for the coaches there. And if it's not you being there, ensuring that the coach is there, it's being done with the same level of vigilance.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that it's apples to apples versus kids 40 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where'd you get this? Well, we did laser before, but we just did hand this time. All right. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that's what we're training our team to do at my team that works with sports performance is that we're going to have a similar structure every single day. So whether it's me or, our first coach, second coach, third coach, whatever day you come in, you're going to be doing the same basic thing. Your warm-up's the exact same. Your lift that you do on Mondays, always going to be the Monday lift, for, whatever series of weeks we're on our block. It's going to change. Last night we had a couple of kids in, that worked out and they had done the workout, it made me happy because this is the second week it's in progress. They come up like, hey, I love working with this guy. We're teammates at our high school. We work together and we fed off each other and we made ourselves better. So then for us as coaches, that's easier. If all you have to do is guide the train down the tracks,
right?
And those two athletes are essentially competing against each other, but friendly competition, that makes our job easier and it makes them want to come back more often and it gets them better results. So I think that's pretty critical that we have a uniformity to all the programs. So every Monday is this lift. Everyone's going to do that lift within their capabilities. So if we have, last night we had barbell front squats on our programs. Not every person is going to be able to do a barbell front squat. Like we talked earlier, not everyone's going to go to the same depth. But our job as coaches is to make sure they can do within their means the best they possibly can. So maybe one kid is going to come in and do a goblet squat. So holding a kettlebell in front of them, doing a front loaded squat. Maybe one person is going to do, a light loaded, or maybe even a PVC front squat. Maybe one's doing a barbell. Maybe you have a kid next to you, doing 225 pounds on front squat.
Right.
So it's the same program, but it's in all those different avenues. And that's really where I think we're successful. We're going to be successful as coaches, that we can find a fit that's right for them.
Right. And I think it's like articulating, like, my kid needs cleats. My kid needs golf clubs.
Yeah.
My kid needs a tennis racket. I need the clothes that someone wears, or the uniform to play the sport. And then like you get past some of those things. I need a team to play on. I think sometimes this type of work gets like relegated so far down chain.
Yeah.
Versus, I'll give myself credit on one thing. When I started really getting like, I'm going to golf and I had money set aside, I was becoming a professional. People tend to golf.
Yeah.
I was going to buy these awesome clubs. And instead I spent every dollar of that money on lessons.
Yeah.
And it paid off big time. But it's so funny how when it comes to this, we assume it's just the coach of the middle school knows it.
Yeah.
And the high school coaches know it. And they just know it. And I think sometimes those coaches, they do know a little bit. They do know some, but it's like, what are you there to do? You're there to be a great baseball coach or tennis coach or football coach, which is its own thing.
Yeah. Or FIAD teacher or whatever other job, social studies teacher that they have in a school.
And I just think this has become, like, honestly, like you go back to our bringing this full circle as high school athletes all the way from me through college and you through college. This is why do you own this business? Why do you care so much about like fitness and sports performance, BJ? Like, why do you keep training so hard and everything? I'm like, this was the magic. This was something that I can take and I'm a problem solver. Maybe you can align with this as well. A lot of our coaches are as well, where I'm like, I could take a situation. I found all the elements I can control. And I tried to optimize every single one. Even as a pole vaulter, I'm like, what can I do? Like my step can always be on. I can always do this. I can practice with wet grips. I can practice when it's freezing. I tried to what variables are the kids that are better than me athletes? Because I'm eventually going to run into them. Where's my edge? Yeah. When the uncontrollable happens, did I train the uncontrollable? And I think the same thing was for when my ankle got twisted, that I was able to get up and shake it off, or one kid was out.
Yeah.
Why? Because I walked and did run on the grass barefoot, because I started walking my inward walk, outward duck walk, and all that stuff. Yeah. Was that the only thing that contributed? Can I prove it? No, but I mean, it had to be something.
Yeah. I mean, you have otherwise tools that were already built in and how to, either compensate for it or how to correct it.
I mean, I just think it's like, I hope we're inching toward. I always feel like with this, we're more at the tip of the spear, particularly in more rural areas like Muncie. We're a city, but we're like a city of with Delaware County, about 100,000. In the bigger cities, like this is now, if you go to a bigger school, a 5A school or 6A school, like this is happening.
Yeah.
If you're an elite, it might happen for all the kids, but it's like happening, and then it's happening on top of things. And when people are wondering, even I talked to my son who's really into football, Julian. He's like, how are these kids getting these looks? How are these kids getting these offers? Yeah. And it's like 7-on-7 teams, being like this kind of stuff is what gets you next level ready. Yeah. And when's it too soon to be next level ready? And that's where people get confused, even down to the middle school level or even elementary school level. Like, you can't be lifting weights. Yeah. You can't, it's like think your kids are already moving. They're already swinging. They're already jumping.
They're already coming in contact with other athletes.
100%. Are they playing basketball? Of course they're playing basketball. Yeah. And now there's other sports that didn't exist when we were coming up, like parkour, like Ninja Warrior training for kids. Like this is getting popular. Grappling sports are a lot more popular. Yeah. What's your element? And then again, I use those dials. Where's your red areas that you need to address? I'm like, why? Well, do you like playing the sport? Yeah. Would you like to keep playing the sport? The yellow, which is these are performance threatening, not injury threatening. Yeah. Well, if you could deadlift, double body weight, do we think we might be in a better position when you're rolling jujitsu? Yeah. To not be here, to not probably, or grip strength for jiu-jitsu and things and then there's the optimize. Hey, how do we do things to remove obstacles for this specialness that you brought to the table, which probably in the pros, you have a lot bigger green area, right? Where you're like, all right, how do we keep you on the field and what have you? But I think back to the premise, it just seems like what you're trying to build is we're really trying to build in guarantees. When you get those kids and those athletes that come in, and they can trust that they're in a process that's going to be optimized for the outcomes that they're there for. Exactly.
And I mean, like you mentioned earlier with strength coaches, with high schools to middle schools, it has been for a long time. You're right. It hasn't changed quite a bit, but it's your big schools, so from Wisconsin, Division I was always the biggest one. I know Indiana's kind of backwards from what I used to with.
And Pennsylvania, where I come from. We had the A system. Yeah.
So those are your big schools. Those are going to have your most qualified professionals. But on some of those smaller levels, you're still going to have parent volunteers or people who weren't trained to be strength coaches. So that's really what we're trying to focus ourselves on, because every athlete needs to do three things. You either need to create force, you need to absorb force, you need to transfer force. So whatever sport that you engage in, it's those three things. Create force, transfer force, absorb force. So if you can't do that, likely you're not going to be very durable in your sport, and you may not have a very long career in that sport. So that's really what we're training for. Like I mentioned, we're training athletes. We're not training soccer players or volleyball players or baseball players or softball. We're training you to participate in any sport you possibly want by giving you those tools. Can you move well? Can you create force? Can you absorb force? Can you transfer force?
I love it. What haven't we covered that we should have?
We covered a lot. It's all pretty good stuff. I think we didn't really talk about speed very much.
Let's talk about it.
So speed and energy systems. Again, it's not one of those things, speed's given a high priority for most people. Everyone wants to be faster. So when we talk about speed development, all we're trying to do is how can we get from point A to point B as fast as we can, right? Minimize that time. Or we talk about agility. Agility is just change of direction. Right. All right. So I like to talk to my classes, speed is point A to point B linear, right? For the most part, forward or backwards. Agility, now we're going all 360 degrees range of motion. So can we go from point A to point B to point F to point Z to point X to point D and back as fast as we can? So that's we we need those definitions first before we decide how we're going to get better at those. So speed and agility are critical to every sport out there. In any sport you compete in, withstanding powerlifting, and I still have my powerlifters do some speed days. We still need to develop energy systems. And that's really the best way to do that is to, stress the body in a certain way where it forces some kind of adaptation. So when we're looking at speed, we need strength first, so that's the core of things. You need to be stronger to create more force, but you also have to have good technique. So that's in our speed classes. That's where we spend the first, 10, 15 minutes after the warm up is just looking at technique. How do you move your arms? So going here, right? So all your side, so think, chin to pocket, in a straight line, as opposed to if you're swinging your arms across your body, that's different. That's less efficient. So again, going back to body awareness, most people don't think about that. I'm just trying to run fast, coach. I'm going as fast as I can here. Where we don't think about the efficiency of going chin to pocket and back and forth is going to decrease your time. If we look at, knee drive, we look at, stride rate and stride length. So stride rate is how many steps we take. Stride length is how far apart those steps are. So we're training those positions. So when you go back to your sports, you can be the fastest person on the field, right? You can be the quickest one if you're playing tennis, between the lines. So yeah, you're not going to sprint a lot in tennis, but you're going to have a lot of agility. Right. You can't get back and forth from the back line to the nets. You're not going to be a very good tennis player, no matter how hard you can hit it. So we're training those angles, those positions that will transfer every single sport.
When it's like that speed endurance too. When I talked about the fourth quarter, I talked about later sets in tennis, where it's like you want to be able to get to the same spot with the same or close to amount of speed as before, or else your whole game's got to change.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you have to start making accommodations, and it's like, do you want to be playing your game there, or do you want to have to be adjusting because of fatigue?
Exactly.
Oh, I'm slowing down now. I can't do this. I'm like, well, if that's something you can control. How much, granted, top end, you might have what you have, but how long can you maintain it? Exactly. Like we have some level of agency. I just keep thinking of turnover and distance. Like when you watch Usain Bolt sprint, I'm like, there's both. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
You have like
it's straight and length.
It looks like he's going a different speed, but faster than everybody. I'm like,
like, how's he floating through the air without making ground?
Yeah, right. Where it's like
so quick.
the stride so long where you're like, I'm going to try that. I'm like, I don't think it's going to work out for you. Yeah. It's going to look weird. Yeah. It's going to look like a high knee drill instead of actually like running fast.
Exactly.
And then you get the other kids, like the slot receiver run.
Yeah.
Like the little job. You're like, you're going to be able to turn around really, really quick, but are you ever going to reach a level of speed that's going to get anybody off of you?
Yeah, for sure.
I saw, we went to Cleveland Browns training camp on speed. I think it was last year, and we were watching the wide receivers do their drills, and I'm like, look at this, Julian. Like, look at that footwork. And I'm like, wow, it's amazing. And guys' names, and then all of a sudden this other guy came in and like started doing the drill, and it made it look like the other guys weren't even in pro football, and that guy was Jarvis Landry.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I'm just like, holy crap! Like, did you just see that? He's like, yeah, it looked like it was different. Yeah, it looked like, I'm sure, like if you watch like soccer, like watching Messi play, it's the same thing where you're like, how is everyone missing always?
Yeah. You're a standout among standouts.
Yeah. Gosh, it's just wild. But I mean, even and how much bigger of a deal that is that in high school?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Exactly. When you have like that edge.
If you have just a little instruction, that's all it really takes. It's just, coming in, just putting some focused time into that, it's going to pay a big difference because most of those other athletes in high school field aren't doing that. So if we can help you get that edge, that's a win for you. That's a win for us.
We're not doing it consistently.
Yeah.
Because I have a son who just wants to go hard, and his friends, they want to go hard. But like, is your athlete one that just trying to like rides the emotional waves and trains only when they're motivated? Yeah. Or are they one like that grinder, like the baseball player at Ball State that you talked about earlier, where it's like day in and day out, I'm at least going to show up.
Yeah.
And I don't need that. Like, and I know I'm going to show up some days and I'm not going to want to be there. I'm going to show up sore some days. I'm going to show up tired some days. I'm going to show up after a couple losses. I'm going to show up after I didn't perform well on the field, but I'm like, I'm going to pull the handle on the door to go get it in. I think that's where you get the best out of the prescription.
Yeah.
Because now you have the most influence working on you versus like even in my profession and leadership, like, I read this book. I did this book study with my leadership team. Great. So what'd you guys do? Oh, it was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I played like fitness that way, that's almost like the equivalent of like, I worked out for 2 months this year. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm a vegan on Mondays. You know what I mean? I don't eat any sugar on Thursday. It's like people would think like laugh at you.
Yeah.
Exactly. But when we think about training sometimes, Like people think that way. Like, oh yeah, we have speed work built in. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
And they can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in there. Okay.
Yeah. I just do a couple run drills and that's it.
Yeah. And same with warm up. Everyone jokes like, why do you go to class? You know all this stuff to like program and do everything. Like, why do you go to a group class? Why do you go to train BJ? I'm like, I go for the warm up and the cool down.
Yeah.
Why? Because I will still not do it.
Yeah.
It's not a knowledge
show
problem.
up with the mentality that you're Dwight Freeney can come in and squat 5 or 405.
Yeah. It's not a knowledge problem. It's a doing problem. And I have it. So
and that's consistent. Just like, taking from leadership from James Clear with his Atomic Habits. It's the same thing, just coming in every day, just giving a little bit of effort. All those little choices are going to blow up to be something big in a long time.
Compound interest.
Yeah.
Compound interest in your body, compound interest in your bank account for sure. Well, awesome, Bill. So if someone's listening right now and they want to at least learn more about how they can work with you and your coaching staff, where should people go?
Sure. A couple places. We are on social media. So 2 different sites. One, Arsenal Sports Performance, or at Arsenal Sports Performance on Instagram and on Facebook. We put a lot of content out. That's been one of my big pushes these first couple of weeks is, hey, let's show people what we do. So people are used to the Arsenal in town, and that's what we're working towards next. We're not just a CrossFit gym. We have so many different avenues, and sports performance is just one of those parts of the business now that we're trying to grow. So Arsenal Sports Performance on Instagram and Facebook. I have a social media, Coach Z Performance. So I'll relay some of the information and put some other strength conditioning information out there. So those are the best ways to get a hold of us.
Awesome.
Otherwise, just stop in.
Yeah.
We love people to come in and see what we're doing. Sometimes the music may be loud, the doors will be open, but don't let that scare anybody.
Join the team.
Exactly. Just join the team. And we're welcoming. Everyone wants everyone else to be there. It's a big group thing. No one's going to do this alone. And that's really what we specialize in, is accountability, consistency. If you don't want to be there, maybe you have a buddy in class that's going to be there for you and call you, say, hey, you going to a sports performance class, you're going to lift class, you're going to speed class. So find those bonds. It may be, a Delta kid versus a Muncie Central kid, and you have nothing in common besides you're in high school, but you're both training.
Right.
And that's what makes, competition so much better. All those professional players, they're all buddies. You see them after the game shaking hands. They all know each other. They train together sometimes in the off season, but I think that's just having that common bond, it can really help training quite a bit.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
hopefully we'll hear a lot more of you here on the podcast studio and other places. And if you're listening, reach out. Like this, obviously, I'm glad you got to hear Coach Z's story, and love to have a conversation with him. All right, till next time.
Definitely. Thanks, BJ.
You bet.